Good morning, church. Scripture reading this morning will be coming from Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verses 5 through 20. And the word says, "There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in low places. Sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? The toil of a fool worries him, for he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Though sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine, gladness, life. And money answers everything. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice. Some winged creature tell the matter. The word of our Lord.
All right. Be seated. We're finishing out chapter 10. We've only got a couple of chapters left till we're done with the book of Ecclesiastes. That should finish up about the time we start Advent. Be great. Well, last week, we were talking about some weird statements that are primarily true, or true most of the time. We've all kind of had these conversations before. He uses kind of like a sports analogy. The race isn't always won by the fastest runner. That's true. I'm hoping today my team, which is missing a lot of key players, can beat a team that's actually better than them. Probably won't happen, but the race is not to the swiftest runner. See how that works? Anyhow, this time he moves on to speaking of verse 5. Chapter 10, chapter 9 are very long arguments. You got to understand, I know I've said this a couple times, but if you're visiting with us this morning, when they write the Bible, the author isn't going chapter 10, verse 1. Which really, when people go, well, show me in this verse. There's a guy I watch every now and then that's kind of a nut. He'll go, show me in this verse where God's the subject of this verse. He's not in this verse, but verses don't exist when Paul was writing. Verses don't exist when Solomon is writing. It's literally a continuous run-on sentence in Hebrew. It starts here and goes this way. And it just goes and goes. And it's in usually no vowels are there. It's usually 3 consonant syllables all the way across. And so what you have going on here is like last half of 8 into 9 into 10. It's one long excursus. We broke it up because we'd still be here. So we pick up in verse 5. And he begins with a statement that we look at and go, this seems odd. And you're right, it does seem odd, which is why we're going to look at them. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly has set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses, and princes walking on the ground like slaves. He who digs a pit will fall into it. A serpent will bite him who breaks through the wall. Weird phraseology. That's okay. We'll get to it. He who quarries stones is hurt by them. He who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, it requires more strength. Wisdom helps one succeed. If a serpent bites before it's charmed, there's no advantage. That's a. When we look at this, these last two sections are chiastic stanzas. The opening is closed out by the next, and so he's making a point. One of the things that he's making a point about is the foolish behavior creates disorder. You keep reading, it's what's going to happen all the time. You're going to have people eating at the improper time, feasting at the improper time, saying things at the improper time. So what happens is foolish behavior causes disorder. You go, okay, I give you the American political system. Foolish behavior causes disorder. Why is that? Well, because typically in that behavior, usually the way it's used here in the text, we'll get to that in a moment. Sorry, I'm self-editing. Typically, we seek our own way, and sometimes we want our ideas to reign supreme. And sometimes, folks, your ideas, my ideas, aren't always the best idea, right? I'll give you a good example. A nation cannot tax itself to prosperity. That'd be like me putting stuff on a credit card to gain wealth. All I'm doing is kicking an inevitable bill down the road. That's foolish behavior. If you do enough financial stuff, you know that there's no such thing as a payment-free credit card. I wished. Only the government can do that. But not anymore. Foolish behavior leads to disorder. Just look at what's going on in our current political system. With folks not voting to open, decided on which side of the aisle you want to fall upon. One side has to vote yes, one side has to vote yes. Foolish behavior causes disorder for those who are furloughed, for those who are needing benefits, for those who are military, for the rest of people within the government, for air traffic controllers, on and on and on and on and on. But if you notice, the fools that are causing this mess are the ones that aren't giving up their paycheck. So notice, take a look at this. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Well, what error is proceeding from the ruler? Well, he's going to start off with folly. And one of the things that is going on in this passage, we clean up the word fool and foolishness. If you were to read it from the Hebrew, we use the word the stupid person, the dullard. We don't use the words the way we used to anymore because we've all been told that calling someone ignorant is a put down and calling someone stupid is a put down. Neither is the case. If you understand etymology of words and how words are used, a ignorant person is a person that has done a thing but does not know that it is wrong. They're ignorant of the facts. A stupid person is a person that has been made aware of the facts and still continues to do the thing. You can't be a habitual committer of the same crime and go, I'm just ignorant of the law. Nope. You're technically stupid. We don't let kids call each other that because that's not what they mean. And so what we do is we tell them it's a bad word instead of instructing them on what the words actually mean. And then we fail to understand a lot of times what's going on in text. He's literally calling the next group of folks that do the things that he calls foolishness or folly, dullards, and stupid people. Why? Well, we'll talk about that. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. Well, it doesn't make sense when you do folly because it makes it sound like it's something that you do outside yourself. But if you put the word the stupid person sits in high places, he sits in the place of honor. Where the rich person sits in the low place. Well, Jesus says that, you should take your place. It's not the point Jesus is making in that parable, in that statement. What he is talking about is that you have people that elevate themselves and get elevated to their own level of incompetence. I've seen that in the military. I've seen that in machine shops. Sometimes we promote people to get them off the floor. Why? Because they're dangerous on the floor. They will kill somebody with one of the bars that come flinging out of their machine because they didn't secure it properly. We've all seen people that probably were best as the village idiot, but we promoted them to, court jester where it was safer. Why is that? Well, because sometimes they elevate up. And also, the folks that are also politically astute, but they are not very bright. Or they're bright, but yet they choose not to be. And they typically work their way up to the top, and then they're in charge. And then you wonder where all these bad ideas come from. And what happens is folly causes a disorder to where the people that ought to be in the places of prominence that know what they're doing and know what they ought to be doing have been replaced by people that don't know what they're doing. I'm going to help you out. New York is about ready to do that. They've got a young man who thinks that free is a good campaign slogan, and he's going to give free to everybody. Here's the thing. There's nothing in life that's free. It all comes at a cost. Salvation cost Jesus Christ his life. He caused him to die, to be buried, and to be resurrected. Everything comes with price. So young children, when they tell you it's free, it's not. Someone pays the bill. He's never worked a day in his life. He's never held anything of office. And he's going to run the largest city in the United States passing out freebies. The stupid person is going to be elevated to a high position. And the wise people are not. Do you see where he's going with that? And you say, I don't know if that's fair. I'm going to help you out. Socialism has failed everywhere it's tried. Everywhere it's tried. Everywhere it's tried. I've seen slaves on a horse and a prince walking on the ground like slaves. You have the disorder effect of folly. You have men that should be riding. Now, why is that? Because it's a position of honor. Now, again, you do have the humble example of a ruler willing to allow one of his servants to ride his horse out of a case of humility. That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about the ruler being a fool and fool enough to allow a stupid person, that's the text, I'm not making this up, to ride on the horse. The slave to be on the horse. Now, why does he do that? Because they've embraced folly. They've embraced things that you would think they would be smart enough to disavow. We'll help you out. We have this in our culture today. We have a whole group of people that will tell you that women can have a prostrate. And they're elected officials. You thought I was too harsh in the analogy. There are people that believe that boys can be girls while claiming that girls can be girls too and that they don't know what a woman is. I'm married to one and have raised two. I pretty well have that understanding down. It's folly. It's futile. You have people today that have bought into all types of lies because they've been reported over and over again. When I was a kid, Leonard Nimoy was on TV telling us we were all going to freeze to death. You can go to YouTube and watch it. And the arguments that Leonard Nimoy uses about climate change then are the same arguments that are used now, but this time the earth is getting hot. How did that happen? It's called weather. It's simply called weather. And what happens is we have bought into these things. Another one is, ready? There's nothing that exists outside of you. You are your own arbiter of truth. The problem is that's disorder and chaos. Why is that? Because what happens when my truth encounters your truth and your truth gets in the way of my ability to get my truth done? Who wins? Well, the person that can exercise the greatest amount of force. See, all of these things, we go, well, that didn't happen in our day today. Really? Look at the American political system and all the nonsense that is pushed through the education system and all the stuff that's pressed through the TV and all the things that are pushed to your kids through cartoons and movies and all the other stuff. It's insane. And yet we have a culture that has embraced it. And we have Christians, I call them little c Christians, that have embraced it and argue for it. Murder is wrong unless it's in the mother's womb. Proximity does not equate value. You either have human rights or you're not human. And the problem is the one side claims human rights all day long unless it's a baby. That is folly and that is insanity. And those people are in charge. And they make decisions. And anyone with enough biblical and ethical background knows, nope, that's a human being. We don't kill human beings. That's what he says. He who digs a pit falls into it. A serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. Weird, okay. It's all right, we'll get to it. He who quarries stones is hurt by them. What does it mean? Well, one of the big things is, if you dig a hole, can you fall into it? Yes. Usually what keeps you from falling into it? Common sense. Let me help you out about common sense. It ain't that common. The stupid person, the foolish person, can dig a hole and then will forget the hole is there. Secondly, by the way, is in Israel, if you dig a hole, what were you supposed to do about the hole? When I fill it, you're digging a hole for a reason. You put up a parapet. You put up a fence around the hole to where people didn't walk and fall into the hole, or you covered the hole with something. The fool digs a hole and leaves it and goes, "I'll be all right. I'll hold it." Then what happens? Someone falls into the hole. And then we go, "Well, why'd you fall in the hole?" "I don't know. You dug a hole and left it uncovered in the middle of the night." "What do you mean when I fall in the hole?" Some people dig their own hole and fall into it. So you have the person dig the hole, but he doesn't use the wisdom God gave him to follow through with what the law says about what you do when you dig a hole. You warn, you put stuff up to where people can't fall into the hole. A serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. Well, it sounds weird, but when you start to think about what snakes are, and in hot climates, where snakes go to get relief from the heat, and guess where they go? Go to rocks. Here's the other thing, too, is they also make their den in the rocks because at nighttime in a desert, the sand gets cold very quick, but rocks stay warm all night. So you go to the home of the snake, you start tearing apart the rocks that the snake is in, and then you go, "Oh dear, I've been bit." You didn't see that coming? Wisdom gives you the knowledge to know, hey, I'm working in a rocky area, there could be snakes here. I used to do a lot of extreme camping, and the one thing I never did was sleep on the ground. You know why you don't sleep on the ground in Texas? You wake up with a roommate you don't want. Now, I did wake up one morning and rolled over, and I had a skunk on the edge of my bed looking at me like this, and I'm going, Dear Lord, we haven't talked in a long while, but I am prepared to talk to you as long as it takes for this skunk to go away. I'm asking now that if you've ever loved me, to make the skunk go away. That's pretty much the prayer I prayed over and over again till the skunk lost interest in me and wandered off. But it was a bit. The serpent will bite him who breaks the wall. Why? Well, the serpent's hole is in the wall. It's where it lives. It's like being surprised when you go out in nature and you run into animals out there. We used to take kids camping all the time, and they would be surprised when a possum would come to the camp. There's a possum in the camp. Yeah, you're in the woods. It happens. What are you going to do? We're going to let him walk to the camp. Why? Because I'm not going to mess with it. Why? Because it has a bad habit of getting angry. Leave it alone. Quit throwing rocks at it. So you put your food in a bag and put it up in the tree. Do you know why? Because raccoons come to the camp and they look for everything. By the way, we've got some raccoons at our house. I think the neighbor leaves trash out. So anyhow, probably set up some traps later on. He who quarries stone might be heard from them. Yeah. My grandfather was a miner in West Virginia. One of the things he liked to do was plant the explosive charges down the hole. Guess what? The last guy out of the tunnel was my grandfather. You know why? Because he wanted to make sure he cleared all the shafts coming out. And he yelled, fire in the hole. That's how you let everybody know there's things about ready to go off. If he was still in there when he detonated the dynamite, what would happen? Coal would fall on him, crush him, and kill him. Even still, when he wasn't doing that, and as a coal miner, he was still down there when they had a couple of collapses. And he can tell you they're scary events. Why? Because he was terrified, and he was in his 70s when he was telling me this story. All of these things happen, but can be made worse by being a stupid person. Right? It's like Luke Skywalker. How many of you have seen The New Hope? You know, when Luke Skywalker finally meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. Right? He meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi hands him the most powerful weapon in the universe, a lightsaber, and Luke does this. If it turns on, it's going through his eye and out the back of his skull. Luke's dead. Not the most shining moment for Luke at that point. You watch it and you're like going, how is he not dead? That's like having a gun and then looking down the barrel and go, I wonder if it's on. Click, 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 click. He who splits a log is endangered by them. Now, I can attest to this. We used to heat our house in Michigan with wood. My dad would gather wood. We'd go with him, gather wood all day Saturday. He'd come in and he'd cut it up on Sunday afternoon in big old blocks. And then my brother and my job were to split it up during the week. And you learn a couple of things about axe handles. One, they break if you put them under a bind, but my dad would beat me if we broke the axe handle more than once in a year, so we didn't break the axe handle very often. Two, axes go through wood a lot better sharp. If they're not sharp, all you do is bludgeoning the wood. And you can get hurt by that, and I've got scars on my legs from where an axe hits, glances off the wood, and guess where it's headed? Your legs. Or you cut a piece of wood and it comes flying off your pile and hits your brother, and he thinks you threw it at him, and then you end up in a fight. One of those things. Now, why does he talk about that? Well, he who splits logs is endangered by. Well, he goes on to the next sentence, and he goes, if an iron axe... It says in your text, if an iron, right? Yeah, axe. They forgot to put the axe word in there. And it's not the spray stuff. It's the metal thing that goes through wood. If an iron axe is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, one must use more strength, but wisdom helps one succeed. Well, how does wisdom help one succeed? Well, I'll tell you a good story. There was a younger man and an older man to get in a tree cutting competition. And every time the young man turned around, he'd see an old man sitting down on the stump and just kind of looked like he's just fiddling with his axe. So the young man starts swinging away, and he starts cutting down tree after tree after tree after tree after tree. And eventually, he sits down for his lunch, and there he's ahead of the older man. Then as the day wears on, the older man begins to overtake the younger man, but he can't figure out why, because every time he looks over, the older man is sitting down. Well, he asks him at the end of the day, how did you beat me? And the older man, because all you did was sit down. He says, every time I sat down, I sharpened my axe. The young man never sharpened his axe, and so by halfway through the day, he's swinging a blunt object at a tree, and all he's doing is beating the tree down to the ground. Wisdom lets you know when to sharpen the axe to achieve the end stated purpose. And a lot of times what we do is we think effort is more important. Effort's important. It's important to put forth effort. But sometimes sitting down and having the wisdom to think through a thing makes that effort go much further. Notice what he says. Wisdom helps you succeed. If a serpent bites, going to the wall, the charmer there's no advantage to the charmer. How many of you ever watched the Indian snake charmers and you see them with the cobra and they lean over and they kiss the snake on the head and everybody's really wild about that, right? It's not that big of a deal. You have to understand, cobras don't strike like rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes strike out. So they coil up and they strike out. Cobras raise up and then they strike down. So they can't strike up. So they only strike down. So if you watch them, they strike in a downward manner. So if you're behind the cobra that can only strike forward and down, you can reach down and get. Now, I'm not going to do this. But that's one of the aspects where it looks like the snake is charmed, because they get the snake to follow because it's following your body motion. And when they reach over to kiss the snake, they know the snake can't strike them. It can if you're stupid, but not if you're smart. And that's the point. There's no benefit to having snakes. I'm going to help you out. There is no benefit for you having snakes. And I don't ask for ID when one gets in the yard. If it's in the yard, it dies. Why? Because that's my yard. If he wants to have a snake population, go to my neighbor's yard. Same thing. Look, I don't play Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom in my backyard. I bought that place. It's mine. The serpent bites before it's charmed. Why? Well, because it's not charmed. And it'll bite the charmer if he hasn't charmed it. If you didn't know that thing about cobras, you'd be terrified of them. I still am. I used to watch the TV show, remember as a kid, Ricky Tikki Tavi? It's about the two mongooses or the one mongoose. Is it two mongooses and a snake or two snakes and a mongoose? Two snakes and a mongoose. Yeah, it's a great it's going to scare your kids half to death. Don't be afraid to go outside for a year. So let's continue on. The words of the wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of the fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. Fool multiplies his words, though no man knows what it is to be. Who can tell him what it will be after him? The toil of the fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. What is going on? Well, this is the second part that you have in the second stanza of folly, or foolishness, or stupidity causes chaos and disorder. The words of the wise man bring him favor. That should be a generalized case. When the smart man speaks, he typically is speaking about things in which he knows. Fools talk about things they don't know, and yet they're sure that they know about it. Notice what it says. But the lips of a fool, the same word, translate that, the stupid fellow, consume him. Why? Because the stupid fellow, the fool, is an expert in his own eyes. I can help you out. You will never, ever see me engage in a conversation that I don't know as much as you or more. Because I'm geared to win arguments. And I won't engage a topic I don't know anything about. And if I'm engaging you, you should ask yourself how much I actually know about the conversation. Because I don't like to lose. So I only engage in arguments I can win. That's how I am. I grew up in a house full of competitive people. I only play things I know I can win at. And if I can't beat you at. The fool, however, is an expert on everything. You kind of see that with some of our politicians out in New York that wants everybody to have drinkable air. No joke. That's what she said. I want every American to have drinkable air. I don't know about you, but I've not had a glass of air in a long while. And there's people thinking she should be president. She should be committed. The blessing of the words of his mouth is foolish, and at the end of his evil talks, madness. Now, why is that important? Well, let's take a look at that. Oh, sorry, just skip the line. The beginning of words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. Why? Well, what happens is they're going to talk as though they know what they're talking about, and what really happens is you just see them lead to an evil madness. Men can be women. Men can get pregnant. I may not be intelligent about biology, but I do know how babies are made, and I ain't carrying a kid. Now, I have birthed a kidney stone, several of them, and that was pretty painful. Very painful. But I've not birthed a kid. And I was there for the birth of our two kids, and I really don't want to participate in that kind of joy. Everybody says it's a joyous moment. I'll take your word for it. Just not going to have to experience that for me. I'll take your word for it. You have the fool making statements that sound like, because here's the reason why it goes to malicious evil. Ready? You now have men competing in women's sports, beating women who used to set aside those sports for only women. You had in the Olympics a man pummeling the snot out of female boxers. And the world cheered. And I'm going, this is insanity. Why is that insanity? Because he's a dude. Let me help you out, ladies. The strongest one of you is no match for the average male. Great example, Serena Williams. Great tennis player. The best on the women's side of the bracket, got beat by the 400th ranked male. He pummeled her. Men typically have 40% more muscle mass than women. Men typically have longer endurance than women. We also, in certain areas, depending on the pain, I got pregnancies, high pain, but also have a higher level of taking on long-term pain and suffering. Doesn't mean that you're weak. Doesn't mean that you're not important. But you don't put men in the arena with women and expect women to do well. That is a recipe for women to get pummeled. And yet, you have politicians that refuse to vote for a bill that would get women out of men's or men out of women's sports. Well, that's stupid people. Notice what it's doing. Leading things to evil madness. And we go, oh, no. Look, folks. It's as plain as the nose on your face. There's only two genders, male and female. The Bible makes that very clear. He created them male and, there we go. Didn't make you Azizes in them, whatever. A fool multiplies his words, though no man knows what it is to be. I'm kind of a political guy. I kind of like watching politics. And so I'll go over and I'll watch the answers. My favorite guy to watch is Senator Kennedy from Louisiana. Have you ever watched him? He's got that good heavy drawl. And before he starts taking you apart, he goes, your words, not mine. I didn't write these. These are your words, not mine. Your words. You wrote this. I mean, he does that. And then he listens to their answers. He goes, oh, you didn't say anything. You talk, but you didn't say anything. Here, I'm going to ask you, these are your words, not mine. He's a hoot to watch. And you watch them answer, and you're listening to it, and they're saying buzzwords, and they're saying cliches, but they're not saying anything of substance. And the reason for that is, if they say anything of substance, they know they're caught. And that's problematic because once they're caught, they have to defend the view they have. So they say nothing. It's kind of like when I got in trouble. You would try to say everything under the sun. So what happened at school today? I don't know. What did happen at school today? Well, I got a call from your teacher. Really? Which teacher called you? And about what? About this. I can neither confirm nor deny that may or may not have happened. What did they tell you happened? The whole goal is to drag it out to where they get frustrated and not beat you later on. That didn't work. So, the toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Misses the mark in the way he's going about things. He uses the concept of being on a path to go to the city. But you can use this in any aspect. We've all seen the individual that probably isn't a job they should never be in. When I worked at a machine shop, we had a guy that worked with us for 2 weeks, and we all went to him and go, probably need to find another job because you're going to get us all killed in the shop. You're dangerous. We've all been in places where we've had individuals that either due to lack of skill, lack of intelligence, lack of dedication, have done things for y'all like, this probably isn't the job for you. And some folks go, well, I'm going to double down with effort, and effort is great. Effort's important, but wisdom has to couple effort. Otherwise, all you're doing is redoubling your efforts. It's kind of like going up against a door that says pull, and I'm pushing. I can push as hard as I want. That door is never going to open. Wisdom requires me to look, and it says pull. But if I go, yeah, it says pull, but I'm going to redouble my effort. And then go, it worked for Samson. Yes. Not for you. And so what happens is we take our time and we look at things and go, well, if I just redouble my efforts. So sometimes, not so much. Let's take a look at the last little bit here. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, and when your king and his son of nobility and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. That helps us understand the phrases going on here. Through sloth, the roof sinks in. Through indolence, the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter. Wine gladdens life. Money answers everything. That is not saying what you think it says. Okay? We're going to cover that. All right? Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature will tell the matter. Personification. Woe to you if your king is not talking about child kings. It's talking about a childish king, about an immature king. Woe to you when your king is a youth or immature or doesn't know the political landscape. Woe to you, New York, you're about ready to elect a childish king. And he is going to bankrupt the city. Because, let me help you out. Those of you that believe in taxing the rich, there aren't enough rich people in the world to tax. There's not enough rich people in America to tax. You could take all of their money away from them and you would still end up with a deficit. Why? Because you still spend at deficit spending. There's not enough rich people to tax. We love that saying because it's not my money. Let me help you out. They're going to lower the bar to where if you make over $80,000 a year, you're rich and they're going to tax you too. That's the point. When your child, his child are immature, why? And your priests fast in mourning. Well, let me ask you this question because it's a weird thing. We look at that and go, what does he mean? When do you normally feast? Usually in the evening time, right? Feasting in the morning is a bit of an oddity. Let's eat and get really, really heavy and full and then go fight a battle. Said no soldier ever. Why? Because you're not lugging that around all day. You go, you win the battle, you come home and you There we go. So what does that show? One, if they're feasting in the morning, they're out of order and understanding, and they're using folly and foolishness to get to that point. So the prince that feasts out of order, the immature king, they do things that are not appropriate and out of sync with what is to go on, and yet it appears to be normal. Happy are you, O land, when the king's son is of nobility. Means he's not an immature individual. He's a wise individual that applies good prudence and understanding and taking care of military matters. And when your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for, the implication is when they're feasting in the morning, guess what they're doing? They're drinking all day. They're day drinking all day. Well, let me help you out. If you've day drunk all day, will you be capable of fighting or defending? Nope. Will you make good decisions drunk? I've never met anybody who made the best decisions of their life drunk. Usually they end up with a tattoo that's a panther or one that says mom with it slightly misspelled. Yep. Or they end up married to an entertainer. Just tell you what happened from my time in the military. Feast at the proper time for strength. The proper time for feasting is for strength, not to get drunk. Through the sloth, the roof sinks. Through the indolence, the house leaks. What's he talking about? Well, same thing was with a kingdom. In your own home, if you do not take care of the house in which you live in, if you just kind of look at it and go, somebody will fix it for me. I'm waiting for someone to fix this, or someone's going to come around and help me. Guess what? It's never going to get fixed, and eventually your roof is going to leak, and as it leaks and continues to leak, guess what it's eventually going to do? Fall in. It requires that when you own a home, now he's not just simply talking about home ownership. Apply it to anything. If you're lazy at work, and don't complain that you didn't get the pay increase. Why? You're lazy. What happens is a lot of times we reward that because, well, they're a nice guy. Or they mean well. Okay, well-meaningness is it works only so far, but eventually they got to actually do the thing. Through sloth the roof sinks, and through indolence the house leaks. The fool and the folly, the stupid person, the dullard, that's how they treat the things they have. Why? Well, one, here's the thing, is a lot of times it's probably, in our case, you will see, folks, a lot of times it's not purchased by them. If you've ever watched very well-to-do parents that buy things for their children typically grow up not having an appreciation for the cost of a thing. And when they break the thing, it's no big deal for them to replace the thing because there's no skin in the game. I was raised very much to understand the cost of things for one of two reasons. If I broke it and I couldn't pay for it, I usually got whipped for it. So I knew it cost something. But then when I started going to work, at the age of 14. When I went to start work, I realized I had to work X number of hours to buy that cool thing over there. And there's times when I started doing the calculation, I like my money more. It's too young to buy guns, so that didn't count at that time. Bread is made for laughter. Now, he's going to say some things here that we think that we can utilize to justify really bad behavior. He's not. Bread is made for laughter. Wine gladdens life. And money answers everything. Well, the word bread there can typically be referred to as feasting, and it means kind of that. So it stays with the feasting mindset. Feasting is made for laughter. It is at its appropriate time. Feasting in the morning, as he just handed, where you get hammered drunk, is not exactly a good thing. Why? Well, because you had the rest of the day. Now think about it. He's also used about like digging through a wall, digging a hole, and swinging an axe. Let me help you out. All three of those activities you probably want to be sober for. I'm just saying. Wine gladdens life. Now, he's not wrong. There's a proverb that says, when one is sad, let them drink wine so their heart may be merry. Why? Because it helps alleviate the sadness of things. But it taken to an excess, it doesn't gladden life, it enslaves life. And so again, wisdom is there for the understanding of what is going on. Money answers everything. Well, if you ask a socialist, they will tell you that is true, and other people's money is the money we want. Eventually, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. By the way, Margaret Thatcher said that, not me. And what happens is we think that if I just had more money, I'd be happier. And a lot of times, our discontent has nothing to do with the amount of money we make, but where we put our faith and confidence in, and where we put our wisdom in. I've met a lot of people that made a very meager existence, and they were extremely happy, very content people. And I meet a lot of people that make a lot of money, and they are very discontented people. Why? Because they're always worried about somebody stealing from them. They're always worrying about somebody getting over on them. They're always worrying about being taken advantage of. They're always worried about getting the next thing more. They're always worried about the next trip, the next thing. And there's nothing wrong with having nice things. And there's nothing wrong with going on trips, vacation, and all the other stuff. What becomes wrong about it is when it becomes over-prioritized in your life. Folly, wisdom, stupidity is the disordered effect of placing certain things above what ought to be. The over-reliance on money to save you from your situation requires you to devalue a relationship in God who saves you from your situations. My money will save me. My money will make me rich. I don't need a God. And you hear this in culture today. We don't need a God. We're a wealthy nation. No, she says he falls out with another thing for wisdom and foolishness. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature will tell the matter. He is not talking about birds and winged animals that have the ability to hear and speak. This is called personification. In your room where you think you're safe. Now, in the ancient days, they didn't have central heat and air. And in many places outside the United States, they don't have central heat and air. Don't know why. It's the 21st century. So you usually have your windows open. And people think because they can't see you, that you can't hear them. And so they talk, and they gossip, and they say things that they swear up and down they would never say to a person's face, but they're more willing to say it to their back. And the problem with that is it will almost be as though someone has gone and told the person what you've said. Well, it's usually because you speak loud enough that we can hear you. I have a booming voice. It's kind of hard for me to keep things quiet, even in my own office. I have to turn on music in my office to drown out the sound of my voice. Why? Because my voice booms. It's part of being, you're trained as a minister, you train yourself to have a big voice. And so when I have a conversation, even at a quiet level for me, it's still loud. It's okay. I'll use you as an example in the next sermon, Rebecca. And so I can't have private conversations unless I'm at home and the world is wearing noise cancellation earphones. And what he's saying is this: wisdom lets you know when you should criticize and when you should shut the cake hole below your nose. Because the criticism you may have is going to get back to a person. And here's the thing about gossip or slander. When it gets back to the person, will it be stated verbatim with context? No. it'll get back skewed and read through the emotions of the gossiper, which then creates more problems because the person that finds out about the gossip is now going to be irate because what has been said is not what was said. It's better in those situations to say nothing. Why? Because in those situations, and look, folks, I'm just as guilty as anybody else about that. Why? Because we all have family. You know, we even have those family members that we don't like to see even over the holidays. And sometimes what we say gets back to them without the filter we used. All of this is the sign of wisdom and folly. Wisdom provides prudence, wisdom, knowledge, and the ability to know discernment. Why? So that when you go about things, that you know the things that are required from you through daily life and the things that are required from you from a holy God. Folly believes that you can behave in any way that you want, and it's okay. It'll all work itself out. We see this in a culture today that we have today. We have a culture today that is lazy. And it's unbelievable about how lazy they are. Well, I'm not going to work for anything less than that. Or I'm not going to do... You apparently aren't hungry enough. Hunger is a big motivator. Unless, of course, you're subsidizing hunger. Then you develop a lazy generation. And eventually what happens is that generation is going to continue. You say, well, that's not fair. You know why? How many of you have ever been to a national park like Yosemite? Been to Yosemite? They have big signs up. What does the sign say? Don't feed the bears. It's not that they don't want you to feed the bear so you can't see the bear. But if you feed the bear will quit hunting. And the bear will assume that all the food on the table is for him to eat. And will eat the food instead of hunting. And they want the bears to hunt the food that's there, not you for food that's there. Because you're enticing lazy behavior. Folly produces bad wisdom, bad economics, bad governance, poor church relations. Wisdom produces the good things. And how does that wisdom and folly base? What's the overarching answer for this? Where does it come from? What's the source? There's an objective standard that God produces. He has been telling you through this book what is wisdom and what is folly. It's not what I think is folly, not what you think is folly, not what you think is folly. It's what God calls folly, what God calls wisdom. And it's the objective standard of a holy God that cements what wisdom is. And it's following the laws and decrees and the word that He has set forth. Some of you are here today. If you're here today, you've kind of been skirting the edge of wanting to be the village idiot. I'm going to ask you today to embrace an understanding of a holy God through reading His Word. You're here today, and you've been endorsing practices that are counter to the work of a holy God. Men can be women. Boys and girls are malleable in their gender. These things are fallacies in their belief. I want to call you to repentance for that. Why? Because these things go counter to the work of a holy God. As the praise team leads us, if you're interested in joining the body of the church, please come forward and we'll have a conversation about that as well. As you stand.